Hi. I made a stained glass crop circle of an image I saw, I think it was from England. I made it years ago, and I know crop circles have a really energetic pattern. I just wonder if you repeat the image in some form of art, if there's still any energetics to that. Or is it just pretty?
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
I'm not sure that I heard every word of your question.
Oh,
Would you mind repeating it?
If you make an image of a crop circle, I know crop circles, when they're in the crops, have an energetic pattern.
Right.
And I wonder if you make an image of that, if it's still going to carry any of the energetics, or if it's just really only what's been put in the crop.
Oh, that's a very good question. Yes, you see, I think these patterns in the crop circles are really significant. I mean, they're not only symbolic, some of them, and we can recognize some of the symbols, but because of the geometry and their proportions in the crop circles, they do have particularly special energy. In other words, each crop circle seems to have its own unique energy, although they all have enhanced energies if they're genuine. And by genuine, I mean by the unknown, mysterious source, rather than being tromped down by people. Those are not the genuine ones. But anyway, the designs, yes, I do think really have power. Just like when you see sacred geometry anywhere, like on a carved part of a church building or stained glass window or wherever you might see it, that has power too.
Okay.
So that's a good question. So many people feel that even if they look at a picture of a crop circle, like a photo of one with the correct proportions and correct geometry, that they're affected even by the picture. That even looking at a picture of a genuine crop circle seems to have a transformative power. And the woman who wrote the book with me, we co-authored it, Judith Moore, I know some of you have actually been doing some meditations with this wonderful woman, Judith Moore, and she channels an 11th dimensional being. And the 11th dimensional being said that for anybody, even looking at the picture of a crop circle, that your own DNA is enhanced. So that's pretty significant, I think.
If I can also respond to that for a moment. You know, everything Barbara said absolutely is true. I think there's a number of reasons why they're doing the crop circles. One is because a lot of these are ancient Hermetic images. And Hermetics, if you're not familiar with that term, is a way that the ancients encoded information so that literally by looking at a symbol, you could enter it and it starts unlocking doors like a key hyperdimensionally. So that's actually how it works. And of course, Mandara's beautiful presentation yesterday, is she even here this morning? Maybe she's getting a little sleep. But, you know, her presentation showed how these yantras, which are the mandalas you were talking about, that are laid into the crop circles, are actually frozen sound. So it's sound frequency in third dimensional form. You know, everything in the universe is sound. You know, in the beginning was the word, you know, and so mathematics quantifies it in as a point, a single point, but sacred geometry is mathematics in space, you know, and astronomy is mathematics in space and time. So it's like all connected. So they're, you know, mandalas, they're yantras that open up energetic doorways in the mind.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you all for being here. I have a question concerning extraterrestrial intervention with chemtrails. Now, I've seen video where they'll spray and you'll see an orb or something come in and neutralize some of it. Can you speak on that, anybody? And maybe elaborate, or do you know anything about them?
I've never channeled anything that confirms or denies that, but my personal theory on that, based on the ETs that I communicate with, is that it is a manifestation of our human consciousness, not unlike so many other things like the modification of our foods and toxins in our waters. And I don't know how many of you, but I just kind of feel personally that it's getting a little bit better. I have more and more days where I notice I look in the sky at real clouds. And it's kind of shocking because we're not used to seeing that. And I've been counting the days and thinking, wow, we're obviously making change here. So my personal theory is that many of the ETs do not want to tread on our free will, at least the ones who are of the highest intention, not because they don't want to save us from these problems. I think they could certainly do that and have the power to do that. But what we don't understand is that timelines intersect and that we are co-creating an experience. So to change one thing in our reality has an effect on many other things as well. And that's something that they don't take very lightly. So.
If I can address that, the chemtrails have aluminum in them and borium in them, and I think the reason that the government in all of its idiocy is seeding them is because of the solar mass ejections, and they're attempting in their own, not so competent way to refract the solar mass ejection. So I think that their intention was not to poison the population. I think their intention, knowing that the solar mass ejection, there's a lot that they know that they don't tell us. I think they were trying to seed something in the upper atmosphere that would refract the solar mass. But the problem is aluminum is connected and lead with Alzheimer's. And so we have a lot of increase in Alzheimer's and dementia, partly from our Teflon pans, which we all love, of course, but it interferes with the neural net connections in the brain. And they can't admit that because imagine the lawsuits. But all this aluminum going into the soil and then going into us is creating mental problems of disconnect. I'm sure that wasn't their intention, but that's where we are.
All right, thank you.
I feel like everything's holographic, and to look externally and be a victim of the world you see is upside down thinking. So it's like being a parent. These extraterrestrial beings who have our best interest at heart can't stand in the way of cause and effect. Right? I did that for my son for about 15 years. Took all the hits, and then I was mad at him because he didn't learn the lesson, and I was the idiot. It's the same thing. It's like, oh, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. We're not a victim of the world we see, we create it. We create all the distortions based on our poor choosing rather than benevolent choosing, and it's fine, it's just developmental steps. So a lot of, what I appreciate about this conference is there's not a lot of people who are caught in that conspiracy zone where the government's out to get me, people who corner you, who basically are wound in a manic state. And I understand because I used to be that guy. It's a developmental step. First it's like, holy hell, what's going on here? My home was like a shrine to John and Bobby Kennedy, right? And then when I figured out through research that they were assassinated, I just was like, this is, it's such a crazy thing, and the world is so upside down. But you come to the point developmentally where it's the mind is, the holographic mind is what needs to be healed, not the movie screen or Plato's cave. So I tried to veer away from, this is happening to us, rather than we are the ones who are creating any distortion, and it can be healed at the level of the mind. So once again, it's for me, it's all developmental steps. I'm a coach, so it's put in the consistent work with the mind, not against something. Because, as the Buddhists say, it's like drinking poison and waiting for someone to die to judge another. And we're doing it to ourselves rather than having like this benevolent attitude towards what we see. So I know that's a little off topic, but all these conspiracy, there's nothing wrong with them, and they're developmentally, I think, sound, but essentially they don't hold any wisdom eventually. They're just an effect or a symptom of incorrect thinking.
Good morning. My question is, you know, we're in a completely different state right now than we were before, but there is a lot of repetition happening, bringing back things from the past. Like, for instance, talking about when it was, you know, the Syrians came to the earth in Africa, and when that earth was changing, how they took people and put in ships so that they have people reseeding earth after the change finished. And what's happening is people are being regressed, hypnotized and regressed, and they are retelling that story. And my question to you is, I'm praying that that energy will not influence our change, you know, that's so powerful, you know, because it's imprints that comes from the past. So now people are being hypnotized and they're bringing all of that back, saying that they're being, the Council of Light is working, separating groups of people, who is going to be taken where, all of that. And yes, I just want to hear from you guys. I trust you.
Yeah, it's hard for us to hear up here, but I think I know what your question is there's a lot of discussion in this community about two separate Earths, right? And, you know, how are the ETs going to bring ships in and take some of us away and put us somewhere else and all of that stuff. And I just don't buy into any of that based on the communication that I've had with these extraterrestrials. And we are all meant to ascend together. And I think it's one of the biggest issues we have right now in this community, to not divide ourselves from those that we consider the sheeple or not awake, because that is that inner voice I was talking about the other day that is so incredibly powerful, because unity consciousness can only arrive when we are accepting of all humans exactly where they are. And a lot of us are impeding awakening simply by perpetuating these ideals. And I don't believe that the ETs are here to show up and save us and take us off planet. And I don't believe there's going to be two separate Earths. I think that we do have an interesting time that we are in the midst of right now, where there are different dimensional realities and timelines, and people are gathering. I mean, we see it in our own lives. My gosh, even in my own family, there's a huge dimensional difference between what's going on in my world and what's going on in their world. It doesn't make it wrong. And what I will say is, I see so many positive signs that this merging of consciousness, this reassembly of unity consciousness is going to happen. You really have to look for it, and I think you have to look at the planet with a different set of eyes than what we're used to, because we've been entrenched in pulling out the negative and seeing all of the things that are going wrong. And we can certainly go down that rabbit hole because there's a lot going wrong. However, there are little signs in every direction of things coming to the surface that are setting this new template for this merging of the new Earth. And I think it's inevitable. You know, there are many potentials, and that's the one most profound thing that I've learned in doing my session work and in channeling is we'll go in and we'll look at a human's energy field, and they will show me a million potentials that exist. And of course we have potentials that we're vibrating closest with, but that can change as well. And it's the same for collective consciousness. We have a myriad of potentials that may land or ground here. And history, I think, is a really important part of that, because you brought that up, Elena. I feel like when we arrive here in human form, we are not creating from nothingness. We are connected to an Akashic field, a record. And that's why history repeats itself, because it's our ladder of ascension to revisit aspects of our past with a new set of eyes and with a new vibration. And that's expansion at its best, when we're able to take something from our past and actually replay it in a way that benefits ourselves and others. So I think that's always going to happen. But some of the themes we're seeing play out right now collectively that are the most difficult, racial themes, for example, gender themes, I think these things have to come to a head and tip the scale right now, because we haven't obviously resolved them in the right way before. And if we look back at our past and how these issues have come up, there's always been a fight, right? There's protests and there's fights, and we're being challenged right now to address things a little bit differently. Yeah, so that's what Divine Feminine is really all about, is addressing these issues together, compassionately, men and women, right? All races together as one, as opposed to separating. So it's a theme that's being played out everywhere. Yes.
And I love that Micheila talked about different perspectives, right, and seeing things through different eyes, because that's what the animals are here to help us do as well, right? So when we talk about, up-leveling, ascending, it's not only as people, right? It's also with the animals, with the environment, and look at all the shifts we've created, right? We're starting to recognize that animals are sovereign beings, that they need to be invited into part of the conversation, that they're helping us along this path. And one thing that they do, that they started recently, really, is as humans, we have a lot of preconceptions. Hollywood has contributed to a lot of thoughts of Independence Day. It's us versus the aliens. They come in and they're going to take over planet Earth. And what the animal companions have been doing more and more is anchoring in the energy and vibration of our galactic allies. And they hold that vibration so that we can become more familiarized with it, right? So in a lot of animal readings, I'll be working with the animal and they'll be talking to their pet parent about the Pleiadians, about the Arcturians, and it's always in a way that holds a lot of love, a lot of support. It's always incredibly benevolent. So the animals are helping us understand that it's no longer the separation, like Micheila was talking about. We're shifting our perspective, understanding that the humans, the animals, the planets, all the realms that are supporting us in this ascension guide, we're rising up together.
My experience with the galactics that come in and the history that they're bringing is to highlight in the physical body the places in which it's been stuck. And so all the attachments that you have to, like you're talking about the conspiracy theories and all the different things that we've created, it's like what they do for me is that they've come in and make adjustments. They'll sort of, their energy and the frequency comes to me, I experience it, then I'm able to feel the density of the difference that's going on in my body and be able to release it. So I feel like that's a bit why they're here, and certainly in my life, how they've been here, is to be able to, over time, for me, over the last 30 years, my connection with them has been all this. It's been different ways of adjusting my physical body and releasing a lot of this density. So I think that, when you ask about, the Syrians or whatever energies here, feel how it feels to you and feel the density. If you're carrying the density, then recognize that you're pulling back old stuff yourself and then release it, allow it to be. Because there's a freedom in this new earth, that we're feeling. It's not going to be like we're all going to be lifted off into a whole new planet. It's that literally it feels happy. It just feels this energy of light that you probably feel right now. So that's the experience.
I'd like to also respond to that. I love all their responses, and I know, because those of you who were here yesterday during my presentation, I sort of ran out of time there towards the end, where we were discussing, that some of the people who have explored the prophecy of a splitting of the earth. And truthfully, it's very confusing to me. I don't, I like science, I like mathematics, I like history, I like archaeology, I like grounded things, even though I'm a clairvoyant and a mystic. So exactly how in the world would that happen? I have no clue. Is it true? I have no clue. Is it possible for our planet to move up into higher dimensions? Yes, because think about it. Everything moves in a spiral, right? So I think there was a time when our planet was in the 5th dimension. I think it slowly moved down into the 4th, slowly moved down into the 3rd, and now it's turned and it's moving back, okay? So that, I completely get on that program, okay, because that makes sense to me in terms of the laws of the universe. Is it possible? It's possible there's a splitting of the earth. Is it possible ETs will teleport us off and take us to another planet? It's possible. However, yesterday, Mandara was talking about cosmic ley lines. There are ley lines that move through the mineral systems and the mountains and the waters on this planet. They're masculine ones and feminine ones, and they're called different things in different countries. Like in England, Barbara and I are very familiar because we go to England a lot, the Michael lines and the Mary lines in England. But by the time we get down to Greece, they're called the Apollo lines and the Athena lines. And think about it, Apollo's kind of a more balanced male. He's not a warlike male, and he was a healer. And Athena is a more wisdom-oriented, but a little more warlike woman than Mary, the mother, right? So the energies change. But these are the ley lines in the planet. They're also synchronic lines, and these are connected to the galactic grid. Most planets have 4 to 7 synchronic lines. The more synchronic lines you have, the more variety of flora and fauna you have on that planet. Our planet has 18. So we are considered like a royalty planet. This is why it's like a paradise planet. Nobody wants to see this planet perish. Nobody wants to see it be destroyed. Nobody wants to see us like teleported off the planet and taken to another planet. I think we have to transform this planet. We're the guardians of this planet. We're the caretakers of the garden. And so I really love everything Micheila said. We have a choice. And I think that about the future, the future is in motion. We're creating the future, right? With our choices every day. So I think number one, we have to be in the mystery. We have to be in the I don't know, because we don't know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe some of you guys know, but I don't know. And I think we also have to work on ourselves. Our ultimate responsibility, as you were talking about, is, going in and doing that healing work, that inner healing work, and transforming ourselves. And as we raise our consciousness and the consciousness of those around us that we affect, like a stone going into a pond with the ripples going out, this vibration increases. And maybe there's this tipping point that we have reached, as Micheila was saying, that, more people become conscious. And as one of you guys, either in the audience or one of you guys were saying earlier, in one of my conversations, discovering the political divisiveness that's going on now has shown a light on where we are and where we aren't. So now we have a chance to maybe begin to change it. Does that make sense to everybody?
I'd just like to make another couple of comments about the ley lines. Not only are the ley lines running through the entire Earth and energizing places and where the sacred sites around the world are placed, the megalithic stone sites and even the pyramids, those are places where the ley lines cross each other, and where they cross, it's called a power point. So I've been aware of this for many years because of my crop circle research, and the crop circles tend to be put on the ley lines, and particularly on those crossing points, the power points. But also recently, I had a conversation with a wonderful astrophysicist emeritus from Harvard University, Harvard Smithsonian, and he was telling about how ley lines go all the way through space, all over space, and they connect everything. So all the planets, the stars, the suns, the moons, everything, they're all connected by these wonderful energy lines. And then another little aspect, how you get interested in one thing, and then you hear another piece of it from somebody else, and another piece of it from somebody else, and the picture just gets larger and larger. So another piece that I've become aware of in the last few years is that the Sasquatch beings, the Bigfoot beings, according to one of my regressions that I did on one of my clients who had a very detailed, long, positive encounter with a Sasquatch being on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. Anyway, that being was telling her that when the Bigfoot, well, you know, we see them. They actually seem to physically manifest. There seems to be no doubt about that. But they also suddenly, we hear, disappear. And yeah, and so he said that what happens when they, quote unquote, disappear is that they go into a tunnel, an invisible tunnel going through space. So it's big enough to hold a Sasquatch. And these tunnels, well, there's a whole network of these tunnels in the air, we don't see them, and throughout space. And so they go to another location, wherever they want to go to, depending on which branch of which tunnel they travel in. And so I think, I mean, this is exciting to me, you know, the connectedness of everything. That wasn't exactly your question, but it was fun to share it anyway.
Yeah. I think it's healthy not to be upset about the progress the world is making or not making. And just think of yourself 20, 30 years ago and, you know, the patience that was allowed for you to make growth and developmental steps. And, you know, we look at people with, you know, different developmental steps and you get upset. You should be somewhere else. But it's like getting mad at a third grade kid who can't dunk a basketball. It's just like, how do you get from there to where you need to be? And there's a lot of focus on like, oh, it's still not happening. But you got to dredge up the contents of the unconscious mind and see them on the screen of the world. And all these, you know, the Me Too movement and all these kind of racist themes that are up now, it's just like a mind being dredged, and we see it on the screen of the world. And we react to it viscerally like, ooh, that's not me, or that's terrible, rather than it can't be healed other than that. So it's a really healthy thing, just like being in therapy, you know, for 20, 30 years, like some people like me. So I think it's healthy to just view it as, you know, it's enlightenment school anyways. You know, we're all going to the same place, we're awakening, and then you could choose to incarnate or not, and just, you know, holographically share that state of joy, you know, continuously. So that's where we're all going, and I just think it's having respect for where people are at and not denigrating them. And, you know, and the whole, you know, the orientation of this conference is about energy. And I'm like a Course in Miracles guy, and it's all geared towards an experience of oneness, not an intellectual understanding of it. And I'm sure everybody in this room has had those moments of like incomprehensible bliss. Even if it lasts like 10 seconds, it can carry you for months. And it's like, holy hell, that's what I really am. That's the goal. It's not like, oh, I'm that, but you're still not there and I'm bummed out. It's more like share that state with aspects of your mind and try to get away from the being pissed that things aren't changing the way you want. Because that's just the ego messing with you and having you focus on the screen of the world rather than the creation of the world. So that's my take. And I'm not like dissing anybody who's into, you know, any kind of controversial subject. Just know that ultimately it's all emanating from our minds.
Yeah, you know, the thing about the ideas that we have about this happening or that happening, grass is greener once a new idea takes shape or comes to fruition, is erroneous, because if you remove ideas, what do you have? You have just this moment, this singular moment, and that's actually the greatest mystery, to be in the moment, to know how to be in the moment. It's also one of the hardest things, but that's ultimate joy. That's being a child on Christmas morning, every single moment unwrapping presents. And that's what you all want, ultimately. That's what you all want. You know, you think the ideas are going to take you somewhere into happiness, bliss zone, but they're not, you know. You have to remove those to truly see what's happening.
Hi, my name is Marin, and I just wanted to stop and really acknowledge Barbara Long for all the lifelong work she's done, and she's been able to make this conversation a normal conversation that wouldn't have been able to happen just a short time ago. So I really wanted to acknowledge, I'm so happy to see her here, and just stop and acknowledge her braveness and being able to speak out when so many people were not able to.
She said she didn't quite hear what you said.
You know, that is so frustrating. It's not a matter of volume, but somehow it's an echo or a fuzziness when people speak at that microphone.
Okay, I'll talk a little closer. I just wanted to acknowledge you for just having a lifelong discussion with the world on this topic of how ETs are influencing us personally and globally, and it's a conversation that we wouldn't have had to have we wouldn't be able to have such a short time ago.
Thank you. Thank you for repeating it too. It was nice to hear that. Yeah, you know, it's been just incredibly rewarding. I feel I am so blessed because somehow, you know, I've happened to get into this particular kind of work. It's just so expanding. I mean, there's a universe, well, I'll talk about it more this afternoon, but there's a universe, a cosmos full of intelligent beings of all types, all stripes, but some of them are so benevolent and so caring and do a lot of interacting and trying to help us as humans. So we're very blessed too.
I do have a question. I've had interactions for about maybe 20 years, not understanding what they were, and they led me on my spiritual journey, just trying to find out the answers. But I know you recently wrote a book called Meet the Hybrids. Could you talk about what their unique purpose is in being here with us and that phenomena?
Yes, well, I've been gifted with knowing quite a few people whom we consider ET human hybrids. And these are people who actually were born here on Earth from a regular human mother and father, but they were given, before birth in most cases, were given extraterrestrial genetics from a few different species of extraterrestrials. Now, the reason for that is that these beings who gave their genetics to these people, they would love to see humanity evolve in consciousness. And that's what we're all here about, in fact. So these beings would love to help us really grow and expand, evolve in consciousness, be more loving, more unconditional loving, be more aware of the whole cosmos and the beings in the cosmos. And they cannot come here and do that work themselves because they're physiologically so different from us that they would not be able to survive here, would not be able to tolerate our viruses and our bacteria. So they can't come and do this. So the next best thing is that they add some of their genetics and their visits, their communications with these people whom we consider hybrids. So they inspire the hybrids to do the work here that they would like to be able to be here to do. So these hybrids are spending their lives teaching consciousness, spirituality, metaphysics. They're here teaching workshops and classes and doing individual appointments. And they're all great healers, so they're doing a lot of healing. Some of them are even animal communicators, and do really excellent work with that, in person with an animal and remotely as well. So I think it's really an elegant, wonderful thing. Now, there are also, as many of you have heard, there are hybrids who are part human and part extraterrestrial, and they live on the ships with the ETs. They're not human enough in proportion to be able to come here and live here. They might. Some have been seen visiting here very, very briefly, but again, it would be difficult to really live here and tolerate everything that we have here. But so that's kind of a different kind of hybrid in a way. But as they keep breeding with more generations of humans, those hybrids, we're not quite there yet, I don't think, but in another generation or two, we may find some of those beings living here. And then we really don't know what their motivation is. We'll see. I think the future is going to be extremely interesting with these kinds of things developing. But the hybrids in the book Meet the Hybrids, which I wrote with a wonderful man from England, Miguel Mendonça, is a great writer and a great researcher of these things. So we are talking about the hybrids who are living here and were born here and are serving really wonderfully here.
Good morning. It's so beautiful to be in this space with everybody. My God. I have been channeling. My name's Mars. I just arrived today. Thank you. I've been channeling specifically a being named David since October. It's been the newest of the channels that have come in some time. And I wanted to speak, I wanted to ask, how then do we know which dimension they're from, and are we not all extra-dimensional? And are we not just communicating with ourselves in these other dimensions?
Everyone's handing the mic to me. Well, yes, ultimately I think we are communicating with ourselves because we emanate from the one, the origination point. We are all that. So we are multidimensional. I believe that we were seeded by intergalactics, and we have crystalline DNA, which is universal in nature. But to answer your question, because this is exactly how I came into channeling, I had one entity named Jacob who started to speak with me at a time when I knew nothing about channeling, nor did I care to do it. But honestly, my awakening, I was a little angry. I didn't want to talk to beings. I didn't want this mission that they were telling me I had. So I asked a lot of questions, and I became very intentional, and I got a lot of answers. So ask the question, and you can ask it anyway. You can ask it consciously, but you really have to trust what you're hearing and what you're getting from this being, because that's the key.
That
and we think,
I
think that's the difficult thing with channeling is, just like Tricia was saying, we don't know if this is true. Who knows? We don't know. Nobody knows. But if you decide that you're going to trust yourself, I guarantee along the way you will be shown proof of everything that has been told to you. And that is what happened to me. I was shown the signs and the synchronicities and everything that I needed to validate that what I was hearing was not because I was going crazy. And it took a really long time for me to do that, and I took a lot of notes, and one of the most funny things that happened to me at that time was, after Jacob started talking to me, I started just hearing from everybody. So everybody was coming in and talking to me all at once. And I sat down in my kitchen, and I was so mad. And I said, if you guys are going to talk to me, you're going to give me your name first. And ever since then, every single being that has ever come to me to speak has announced their name. Every single time. We are the Syrians, we are the Pleiadians, I am Jacob. I mean, you just need to ask, but you also need to be trusting in what you receive such that the universe will show you exactly what you need to validate all of that.
Of course.
Yeah,
You've got to set the rules. We're the ones on stage. They're,
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, you're the conductor of this orchestra. You know?
You were right.
You're the
They've
conductor.
been saying that.
Yeah, intent is everything in that realm. Everything. I mean, one intent in one direction will take you there, intent in another direction will take you there. But also think of it like this. So here we are in three-dimensional physical zone right now. Let's just say that you're a fish underwater with all these other fish, and something grabs you and pulls you out. A human, perhaps, right? And is showing you this whole other dimension, this whole other world. And then they turn you and, point at themselves. Let's say you're dressed as a fish, right? You got a mask on that looks like a fish. And you're showing the fish, look, I'm a big fish like you. Then stick it back in the water, tells all its buddies that, oh my gosh, there's this whole other dimension with all these fish-like things just like us, right? So it's sort of a process where they'll show you aspects, or they'll even disguise themselves so you can get used to the energy first. But you can always say, show me your true face. Show me your true face. I'm sovereign, and approach me in the way that I want you to approach me.
You said I'm sovereign?
I am sovereign.
Oh,
right? I am sovereign.
You can't come in, basically.
You can't come in unless I invite you in and you follow my rules, ultimately. So it's your intent, But it's fascinating, and it's overwhelming, so much so that you can just open yourself up to anything, but then eventually you figure out, how to close it down a little bit. And
Yeah.
Ask which system they're from also, perhaps?
I'd like to kind of address that too. For me, years and years before I ever began to teach and speak, which has been 20-something years now, for at least probably 20 years before that, I was in dialogues with higher dimensional beings. The Viragi and Sahaji masters from 19 on, then the priestesses of Isis from about 27 on. And then I began to have all these divinities, gods and goddesses come in and introduce themselves. And they're what I would call lawful divinities. These are ones who honor the law of one. They honor your sovereignty. They honor the law of love. They honor your space. Okay, those are the only ones you really want to work with. So if you just simply do a prayer before you start, set your intention just like he said. And, for me, I always say I do my work in the Christ light. So I will, breathe in, go to the heart, drop those golden grounding rods down into the earth so I stay grounded, earthed, and then pull them up and send them through my crown chakra up to the sun. And so before I do any of my work, and this may be true for everybody on this panel in their own way, I'll say, and so at this time, at this moment, I call in the white light of the Christ consciousness, the gold light of the Buddhic consciousness, and the clear, unlimited light of the An Sofa Ur. The An Sofa Ur means the limitless light, okay? And then I'll call in my guides. I call in the energy of the eagle and the dove, the divine father and mother, and the highest guides that I can possibly vibrate with at this time. And that's a real important statement, because even though you may have had guides assigned to you or chose you before you came into this incarnation, as you move up in your vibration, you will have different teams of teachers come in as your frequency rises. So the highest vibration beings or teachers that I can work with at this time, okay, that my frequency allows me to work with. And I literally call down a column of golden light. It's like it's 2 cylinders. It's the outside is gold, the inside is silver, and they spin like 2 cylinders inside each other. And I'll just set them to spinning. I don't have to think about it after that. They vibrate like this. And I'll say in all dimensional realities, in 360 degrees in all dimensional realities, okay? And anything that's not of that field, out. And that's the same thing when I work with a client, because when a client comes in, you have no idea if they have cooties or what, basically. So you want to encapsulate them in the light, and if there's any cooties, you want them out of the room. And I think one time I did not do that, and I've read for over 6,000 people around the world, and it was somebody that definitely had attachments from like a black magician. And I realized that that program that was running in their field was what had caused me to not do that. So, as you move up in your growth, you will have different teams. So, I mean, I have, 25 journals of my conversations where I'm like, what? What do you mean by that? Okay. Are you serious? You have to prove that to me. I'll challenge them, the same thing. And I mean, for heaven's sakes, they're so patient with us. They really love us unconditionally. And they understand that at a higher level, we have an angelic higher oversoul that knows all this. But you know what? We're using 10% of ourselves down here in the world of amnesia. Okay, so they are incredibly kind and patient because we are their hands and their feet in the third dimensional world. We are the vessels through which their light can pour as we open our own light in this dimensional realm.
And that's really quite beautiful, and we're surrounded by such amazing channels here today, right? And so this is where the animals step forth, and they say, perhaps some of us here are interested in channeling, but we're not quite sure where to start. Right? And so that's where the animals help us really open up our energy and our channels. A lot of us growing up, we might have had some experiences with energy or maybe seen things. And as children, it freaks us out if we don't have anyone explaining what's going on, and a lot of us shut down. And what I found is animals are the quickest way to open back up to our intuition and our channeling abilities. Because if you tell me, do you want to talk to a dead person? I'm like, heck no, I'm out, right? But if you say, do you want to know what this most adorable, amazing, cute puppy is saying to you, or your horse, I'm all in. My heart opens wide, right? And so what they say is that's an amazing way to open up to the energy, open up to channeling, because then they also help bring in other energies. They can be the go-between. So you start enjoying new energies, you're comfortable with it. And one way, I see your hands going, one way that we start opening up to channeling is through the hands, right? Through motion, and we call in that frequency, and then we're able to bring in the voice and other aspects come. And one thing that's so amazing is the animals always say, sometimes you guys need a name, right? You're actually just speaking to yourself, but as we're still remembering our own authority and our own inner wisdom, sometimes we need to hear it from someone else, right? But it tends to be aspects of ourselves, our higher selves, the world around us, things that we know. And then we're able to, just as Tricia said, go higher and higher and connect with different consciousness outside of us. So it's really a great process, and the animals love participating in it.
Okay, I think some of my question was actually answered, but my question was for people opening up now to their star families and really just starting to get to know what's going on outside of themselves. How is it best to really interact and engage with these beings, co-creation-wise? Or I feel like some people have them coming down like, this is your mission, do this, or are we taking charge? Are we questioning what we're doing? So just really that, or are we just opening up to energy for density to be released? How best to engage and interact with these beings?
I think I'll start. It's interesting because I had a recent awakening with cosmic connections. And even though the Pleiadians came in 2016 and connected with me and downloaded information, it wasn't until mid into 2017 that I realized who it was. And the way that they came in and they communicated with me was through symbols in my world. So I'd moved to California, and once I got there, all of a sudden my hands were moving. They were doing these motions, and I had no idea what it was. I went to everyone I could, get an audience with, and I was like, what are my hands doing? What is this? I had no idea what light language was, right? So that was happening, and I moved to California, so I needed a car, right? And I had no idea what car to get. I grew up in Brazil, then in New York City. We never needed a car. And so the car dealer, I said, I trust you, whatever you think I need, bring to me. And he's like, all right, I'm going to get you a Subaru. So I got a blue Subaru, and I'm driving around, and I keep looking at the logo, and I'm like, what are these? I really should look that up. Turns out it's the Pleiades, right? So I kept getting all these symbols, and then finally I did a journey and a meditation. I was falling asleep, and I saw my two Pleiadian guides come up, and they said, we are the Pleiadians. And that kind of began that exploration. So definitely part of it is looking for those symbols, and they'll drop those in. And as you build the relationship, right, it's not often that they come in and they're like, this is who we are and this is what we want to tell you. We get to know each other. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, in the first book I wrote, Dialogues with the Angels, I talk about, this is, 30 years or something ago, like how long it would go. Anyway, it was a while back. And I wound up, I've been working with the masters for years, soul traveling, all that. But, I took a class on channeling. I thought, okay, well, let's just check it out. So I'm an evidence girl. Yes, I'm a mystic. I see all this stuff, but I like the proof. My dad was like an attorney. He was the county attorney, totally third dimensional if you couldn't see it. So I have that whole investigative thing going on. So it was a 4-week class. The first week we learned about spiritual protection, all of these classic things so that you pull in the highest vibrational beings. The second week we were going to channel. I was like shaking in my boots, but I had gone out for a UFO sky watch the weekend before, and we called in all these UFOs. And I'd slept on a rock, all night. So I had this terrible crick in my neck. I went to the chiropractor 3 times that week trying to get rid of this pain. I was in so much pain. So we took the class, and my guides came in, and, the thing was we had a partner, and the partner had to ask us questions. And so the partner said to the being that I was channeling, Ariel, the Divine Mother, he asked a question, how can Tricia get rid of this pain? And she said, Tricia likes evidence. And we will remove it now, just like that. And it was totally gone. And I realized I had endured that entire week of pain because I'm so stubborn. And, I was like, you better prove it to me. Okay. So I have to laugh about what a rebel and a truant student I really am with these beings, because they would come in and I would just I set up an altar. This is a good thing to do in your house, where I would go and meditate every morning, and then sometimes I'd be flying out the door and feeling guilty for not meditating because I didn't have enough time. You guys know how that goes, right? But just having the physical altar there, I have an altar now in my healing room, and you can change what goes on it. Usually it's air, earth, fire, and water. So like I have a statue of Mary, the Divine Mother there. You can have a shell, that's water. You can have a feather, that's air. You can have a candle, that's fire. I mean, these are simple things, but you want it to be a living altar. But it's a focal place for your mind and your consciousness. So I would sit and a chant, because the chanting, puts me in the vibrational field, and then I would start talking. And one of the first things I discovered was really, when I'm in the mental body, you know how it is, or the emotional body, we rant and rave. Why is this? Why is that? And how about this? And could you bring me more money? And how pay those bills? And my family this? And the boyfriend that? The crazy lives we live. It's fine with them. You can just rant and rave as long as you want. The most important thing is to be authentic. Be real. Be in your heart. And when your brain is totally dumped, all of the junk that's in it, then you can be calm. It's like a telephone call. You call them, and the poor things, they have to listen to us, and you say what you have to say. And when you are completely done and your mind is clear, then sit and receive what they have to say back. That's the other part of the telephone call. Meditation, we're like, is anyone on the line? I'm just trying to listen. Prayer is where we're talking, and then, got to go to work. Bye. Okay. The process is you talk and you download and get rid of, ask your questions, do your challenges, ask for what you want to understand, and then be silent when your brain is clear and receive.
I want to share my experience. I came into this with a curiosity, just like a childlike innocence. And I remember in the very beginning, I was like, wouldn't it be cool to just like communicate with people and have different entities or different things? And so then a series of events took place that I ended up sitting in front of a reader, and the first introduction was to the council. And they came and they told me what I do, and they told me this life path, and I didn't think anything about it. And they said to me at the time, you do automatic writing. And they told me, go home and do in the same space, in the same time, and we'll show up. And so I did, and I started to, and at first I just held the pen and just hang there, and then eventually started to move. And the questioning for me was, of course, it was showing up in my handwriting. I'm hearing it in my head first, and I'm going, is this real? Isn't this real? And so I just said to him, I said, okay, well, I'm confused a little bit. I hear it, and I'm not sure. And so I said, do something. And so they shifted the direction of my handwriting. So my handwriting goes this direction, and they made it this direction. And so I just began to get a feel for me. It was all about me, you know, and I came into a very curiosity and just kind of relaxing and go, okay, well, I can feel that, you know, okay, I'm going a different direction. And then during that time, there was a different vibration. And I began to be able to tell the difference between, like for me, it was whether or not different energies are doing in a direct channel. Some do it more telepathically, and you can feel a little bit difference. And it's really no different than you communicating with each other. If you start to pay attention how you're communicating with each other and you step in, you're going to hear. Sometimes you'll hear things from a person. Sometimes you'll feel it. Sometimes you'll have a sensation in your mouth. All of your regular 5 senses put together create this 6th sense. And that's really what I began to recognize. And it was just a fun thing. And I still don't know who all I work with. And there's a lot coming in. And now, you know, so to me, I could feel whether or not it was lower energies, we'll say, versus higher frequency energies, just like how you feel with each other. It's that simple.
What I love about Denise's story is I think that the first recognition of our star families comes in physical. Because if we can't get telepathic with it yet, and we're not receiving the messages, and we start to make it really complicated, you know, and get into everyone else's process. And the thing that's really challenging about that is we're also unique in how we connect. And people have asked me time and time again, will you teach a channeling class? And I've always said, I'm happy to do a session with you, and we will pinpoint exactly what's best for you, because we all tune into different senses and sense energy differently. But we have to be in the present moment to actually contact our star beings and cosmic families. And the reason for that is they're in that 0 point field. And presence is 0 point. That's where it all comes together. So if we are outside of the present moment, which we have been trained to be constantly, either in the past or in the future, we're going to really have a hard time seeing those signs that Denise saw, where she was led to exactly what she needed to see. So definitely be present with what's taking place in physical, which seems totally contradictory to that type of connection, but it will totally lead you in to exactly what you need to know.
Yeah, I'd say you don't want to get caught up in spiritual trivia, like who's coming through me, this collective, you know, to look at another and to like want their skill set too. Like, oh, I'm a loser, everybody talks to Micheila, you know. We have different skill sets, right? And for me, you know, I started getting communicated to through animals. And like years ago, it was like my ex, Kimmy, my brother, you know, my crew, we were all on the same page. And my buddy committed suicide, and he was like a steward of the land where we lived. And then the snowy owl shows up, who they are not native to Western Massachusetts. And he's right on the wire right the next day after my friend killed himself. And it was like respect for him, for his spirit, and taking care of the land for so long. And that owl was there for like 3 weeks. I was like, there it is again, there it is again. And I'm not a big fan of testimonials because it's like, my point is it was legit. And I kept seeing the owl, we all did, and it was like heartening. It's just like, okay, we're taking this incarnation way too seriously. And it was a way I could be communicated with my developmental state and what I could metabolize, right? Like, it's kind of weird, but this owl has the intellect to show up with the intelligence for the guidance. And then I would see foxes and bears, and then I had like a pet bear who'd show up for like months. And then we were feeding it, and I know you're not supposed to, and he was like our friend. And then I would start seeing numbers, 1111, 1111. Oh my God. And everybody that I knew would see it in triple digits and license plates. It's like, how the hell can the registry kick out like 444 and 999 on so many plates that drive in front of me? It was like, right? Like, this is like a sci-fi movie. This can't, it doesn't make sense. So, for me, I got my skill set is like being a blue-collar idiot who can articulate, metaphysical truths. And maybe I give permission to guys that are like fake tough guys to be more open-hearted. So I can't wish for another person's skill set because I am who I am. And we all have that. And then the ego messes with us and like, I want the clairvoyance, I want this, I want that, instead of like, let me tune in and choose again. Like my man sitting down there that, channeling, it's like, you're certainly not channeling the Antichrist. You're hooked into something divine, right? And you know that. And it's just like, you follow that. It's choose again. And I think it's like, don't vicariously give your power away to an external source, right? Because it's like, oh, I got all these weird hang-ups and I did all this embarrassing stuff in the past. It's like, no, that's your movie character, right? That's your avatar. That's not you. It's just, a configuration of preferences and things that, you incarnate with to play the game of separation. It's not the flawless, unchangeable you. So, I just find it's good not to get mixed up in spiritual trivia. You will be communicated to at the level you can metabolize. And it's always from yourself. It's so funny, It's like we pray to external sources sometimes instead of praying to the oneness that we are, or referring to it. It's not even, it's reverence, but it's not like, please do this for me. It's like, wow, you're awestruck by being hooked into, the creator, if you will. So thanks for enduring my weird speech.
Good morning, and thank you for doing this panel. This is my dream to be here. Your story is a segue, actually, a great segue to my question. So far, we've been talking about ET experiences as like ultra-dimensional, something kind of out there, coming like inside. But I've heard people report that they've had actual encounters with ETs who currently reside on our planet, such as people who have been to Isetti Ranch and to Mount Shasta. So the question is, according to the energy right now, because that's all we can calibrate to, is how soon could we anticipate being able to meet these beings as a normal experience, kind of like, in Star Wars, you're just out there and you see all these different beings just walking down the street and you're encountering them. And I'm kind of excited about that prospect, but I just wonder if that's a possibility that it would happen in my lifetime, because I would certainly love to have that experience. Thank you.
Yeah, that's, what most look for is that physical to physical relationship. But, throughout the past, throughout history, what happened was that these beings got turned into gods. And so there's a little hiccup there, especially from the standpoint of human beings needing to move past the physical and to, understand what reality is, you have to go inside yourself. And actually, real communication begins inside. It doesn't begin on the outside. And so when you go inward, so when you go in to experience things, any clairvoyant, psychic person, remote viewing, it doesn't matter. All information comes within. That's where we go when we try to figure something out. We don't go outside. We don't use our eyes. You know, outside is just it's a misnomer. It's inside. Even with our eyes, what we're seeing is happening within us individually. So you have to go inside first. You can have the communication 100%, and that is actually where most want us to be, the higher vibrational. That is where most want us to begin. They don't want to land on our lawns, come out and shake our hands, because all of a sudden we'll be dropping to the ground and like, oh, you're so much greater than I am. They want us to know that they're one with us. When you go inside to communicate, the only way that can work is if we are them.
I'll add to that. I discuss based on my personal beliefs and what I've channeled is I do believe there are varying degrees of ET genetics that are walking around in human bodies on this planet, just like Barbara talked about with the hybrids. I've actually met a hybrid that remembers being dropped off on a ship. And I actually saw it in the channeled session before she even mentioned it to me, like literally was dropped off. But in this room that we're in, ETs exist. What's happening is we're perceiving through a dimensional access. And that dimensional access is always shifting. Some of us, like Tricia, can see into spirit, or Barb might be able to see spirit in the room, and they probably can see all of us. But I think to manifest here in that kind of a form, this planet has got to hold a specific dimension, or they need to change or shapeshift in some way to hold more material. So I think it's a vibrational matching type of game, and I think that we lose sight, like I love John's point, because I think we lose sight of the fact that we actually came here to be physical and to be human, and we are members of a cosmic family, and we are already in deep communication with them, which is so incredibly powerful. But I do think that the type of telepathic communication that we have right now is where we're meant to be. So is there a time frame for them arriving? I don't know if there's a specific time frame for anything, really. You know, the guides that I work with might say, well, we can tell you what that is today by looking at your vibrational potentials, but you're all going to shift tomorrow, right? So that prediction goes out the window by the time we make it. So I think it's all who we're becoming and how that plays out to the degree that we're going to meet somewhere in the middle. And maybe that's because we become more non-physically focused and they're becoming a little more physically just to meet us somewhere.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. For many years, probably 20-something years, I've been going to this incredible community in northern Italy called Damanhur. I don't know if have any of you guys heard of Damanhur? I've taken groups there like 17 times, and you know, I have a mailing list going around somewhere. If you guys want to sign it, I'll let you know the next time I'm going. Damanhur, there's so much I could say, but the brief version is the founder of Damanhur was a man named Falco, like Falcon, like Horus. He came from 650 years in our future. In the timeline he originally came from, we had World War III, and we had destroyed the planet with, you know, things like the BP oil spill and the Fukushima thing times, 100. So he proposed to the Galactic Council to come back in time and incarnate down here as a human, Terran. And they said, okay, see if we can change the timeline. So he chose his people carefully, and he incarnated in 1950 as a guy named Alberto Arauti in the Turin area, the northern western Italy. And by the time he was 21, he was teaching the wisdom of the sons of Horus, which is, let's face it, not your typical 21-year-old Italian male activity, right, okay? So, I mean, he was an alchemist, extraordinaire. And he gathered 12 around him, sound familiar, and they began to chart the synchronic lines all over the planet. And they found 2 places where the 4 lines crossed: Lhasa, Tibet, where the Dalai Lama had been, and then the mountains, the Alps of Italy, where Damanhur is, about an hour north of Turin. And they set up a community. There are about 1,000 people there. They've been going for like 45 years. And their purpose was to create an alternative timeline. And so the first experiments were to see whether or not it was possible to do that. And so they did a lot of things. They like sent somebody back in time to a group of 5 back to Egypt to try to talk the pharaoh into building a pyramid someplace where they knew a pyramid wasn't. And there was a lot of resistance. The pharaoh didn't want to do it, didn't have the resources to, anyway, they got him to do it. And 2 weeks after they came back from that time travel, that pyramid was discovered. So then they realized they could change the timeline. So they're only about, 48 years or something into a new timeline, but we obviously didn't have World War III, as Nostradamus predicted in the 1980s, late 1980s, And so we are living in a new timeline, a timeline of great hope and great possibility, as you were talking about. And these people were literally doing prayer and ceremony 24 hours a day for 23 years, okay, in order to create that timeline. Totally self-sacrificing, amazing people, very clear, very intelligent, totally non-dogmatic, there's no cult here. They are on a mission to help us save our planet. And each of us are part of that because our consciousness contributes to the whole. So I have been over there many times, and so it used to be that one night a week, Falco would meet with visitors. And so I remember sitting in a circle of about, there were 2 or 3 lines of chairs in a circle, and he would answer questions. Afterwards, and I'd taken a group of about 12 people, and one of the people spoke like, I don't know what he spoke, 12 languages or something. And so after it was over, I remember he came back to the cabins late. And I said, "Where were you?" He said, "I was talking with those extraterrestrials that were sitting behind us." And I was like, "What?" "What? I missed that." And they looked just like us, humans. And he said, yeah, they were having a problem on their planet. They only have 4 synchronic lines. And they're trying to figure out if there's a way they can pull the grid of the synchronic lines closer to their planet to create more flora and fauna and more abundance. And they were there to consult with Falco to see if that was possible. So I was like, holy smokes, I totally missed it. They were sitting right behind me. They looked like us. They felt like us, And also, I remember, I many years ago, I used to go to the MUFON conferences. Barbara and I have spoken at a lot of ET conferences, and I remember one time going and seeing a woman that looked so strange. I mean, she was hiding her face with, she was little and she had a hat pulled down. It was like definitely like an alien person. And I didn't know at the time what to think about that, or thought, what, was she in an accident? I mean, was she deformed? What happened? But she was clearly a hybrid. And then later I wound up finding out about a case that I really didn't have the resources to investigate, but it was somebody who is like half human and half something else. But again, because they didn't really look like us, they're like living out in the middle of nowhere outside of Santa Fe, in the desert, so they don't have to go to the grocery store very often. That must be a very hard life, really hard life for them. And then when I was in Los Angeles, there was this guy who believed that ancient Lemuria had these huge cliff carvings, and he'd take people on tours. And I wound up going on one of those tours. It was like a 3-mile hike. And these 3 guys came that I swear were like clones of each other. And they were like stiff automatons. It was like no emotional body. It was so weird. And I realized that these were 3 grays that had crashed and died on our planet, and they had incarnated as humans. And they didn't have a clue how to act as humans. They figured out how to wear they were wearing suits on this tour, okay, with suit shoes, okay? I mean, and whenever they lost one another, they were so scared. I mean, because, that's much more of a group consciousness. So bless their little hearts that they're down here with the humans trying to make sense and figure out what an emotional body is. Bless their little hearts, as we say in the South.
I'd like to make a comment, too. I certainly have met many people who have said, oh, I'd really like to be in touch with the extraterrestrials, or I'd really like to meet one. Well, I think that is possible if you really, really want to. What I'm going to say came from some channeling of a very fine extraterrestrial being. This particular being lives on the binary star system, which we call Antares. It's actually on our star maps. And he would channel, well, it went on for about 12 years. He channeled through one of my clients who was having very, very frequent extraterrestrial encounters herself. But she also channeled this extraterrestrial being. I had many, many conversations with him, which I feel extraordinarily blessed for that having happened so frequently in my life. Anyway, this being, who, by the way, said we could call him Ohana. And then my client, who was channeling him, went to Hawaii and looked around, and she saw all these signs like the Bank of Ohana and the Library of Ohana. And so she asked one of the Hawaiian people, what does Ohana mean? I see that name everywhere on the island of Maui. And she was given the answer, Ohana means family. So after she came back and we met again, she said, isn't that sweet? The name that he said we could call him means family. In other words, we are family, whether we know it or not, with all those beings. So Ohana told me in 1994, knowing that I was already very involved in going to visit crop circles in England every summer, and was sharing what I knew in lectures to inspire other people. He said, Barbara, this was in January of 1994, he said, Barbara, if you would like to go for the making of a crop circle, you can do that. And there are beings from somewhere else who are actually in various ways making these crop circles, the genuine ones. And they would meet with you and take you, and you could experience that with them. And I thought, oh, wow, what a fantastic opportunity. But I'm scared. I was just chicken. I just didn't know what to expect. I mean, would I be creeped out? Would I be returned? Would I be safe? Would I be all right? So it took me 6 months from that time to really think about it and process it and get ready to decide once and for all. And about a week before I left for England that July, Ohana came through the channeling again, and I said, you know what, I've really thought about this a lot, and I think I'm ready. I think I'm brave enough to do this. And how do I bring this about that I can be taken for the making of a crop circle? So he said, and this is the point of my even sharing this, he said, first of all, you have to really want the experience. And I mean, really want it. You have to have real intent. And then you have to ask to be having this experience. Or, for those of you who would like to meet an extraterrestrial, have some sort of good experience with one. You have to really mean it, and you have to talk to them. Best if you talk out loud and tell them of your intent, of your wish, and that you really, really mean it. So that was very good counsel. And as I was driving to Los Angeles airport for about 45 minutes on one of our well-known freeways, driving by myself in my Subaru, by the way, yeah, which I realized after I bought it, I noticed the Seven Sisters on there. Oh my God, I was guided to buy a Subaru. And I had been very interested in the Pleiades for a few years at that time. Anyway, on the way to Los Angeles airport, I talked out loud to whom I didn't know, to whomever were making the genuine crop circles. And I talked for that 45 minutes, and the more I talked, and I talked out loud, the more I really built up this enormous amount of positive energy. And I thank them for making the crop circles and how significant I think they are and how beautiful they are and how wonderful it is that they care enough about us to do this for us, and on and on and on. And thank you so much. And, just building up all this positive enthusiasm. And then I got to the airport and sort of forgot about it for about 3.5 weeks until the last night before the last day that I would be there in England looking for crop circles. And they did come. I actually saw them, 3 of them come into my room at night. The light was off, but I could see there was a little bit of night light, how it comes in through the window. And it all happened. Now, I was not consciously aware of it happening, but the very next day, a bunch of us got on an English double-decker bus and drove for almost an hour to the Avebury, England area. And I was looking out the window and noticed that in a field that we had gone by the previous day, where there was a nice even wheat crop, but that particular day, I noticed that there was a big depression in the wheat, and I thought, oh my God, that's got to be a new crop circle. So anyway, make a long story short, 3 friends and I went back and were the first ones in that crop circle. And it was magical and mystery and very new and full of energy. But then I went home, flew home the next day, and then a week or so later, I had a colleague, regression therapy colleague, come and regress me to that experience. So I got the details that they really were beings, and I had all the details of that experience of making the crop circle. Yeah, it was a beautiful set of circles forming a circle, like a bigger one, slightly smaller, 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 and then a little crescent, and then a circle around the whole thing. Oh, the beings, the ones who came toward me in the room were short, and they had big heads, they all looked exactly the same. These sort of rounded heads, little necks, little shoulders, little bodies. And I only saw the silhouettes because the night light was coming behind them through the window. So I didn't really ever get a look at their faces. And they always stayed behind me as we went through the wall and into space and into this little craft. Anyway, the whole point is that if you really, really, really want to, if you're sincere, you have that intent and you talk to them and let them know. These beings are amazing, Jim. They just do fantastic remote viewing, or whatever they would call it, but they, from zillions of miles out there, they know details if they put their attention to it. They know details about what we are doing and even what we are thinking and what we are wishing. They're so telepathic, as well as having these long-range abilities. So I think anybody who really, really wants to have a contact, you can. But again, you have to really focus on it and really mean it. I mean it with your whole being, your whole body, your whole energy field.
And to add to what Barbara's saying is that a couple of years ago I was taken on a little ride, and I was, usually in my life I've had a lot of contact experiences since I was a little kid, and usually I'm somewhat subdued, mentally subdued, because it's been on the ones where I've been taken by the gray type beings, and they're a little mentally aggressive. It's not my cup of tea, but that's just what happened. I think it happens to a lot of people, and it gets buried. But anyway, it was just a couple of years ago. It was sort of a strange publicity stunt that I was taken on by these beings, and they kept me very lucid, very aware and conscious, but slightly subdued. And we went up into space. We went on a ship, and they were showing me and all these other people that you have this technology, Anyway, the whole deal was I was up there in space. I was wowed by it all, and I was asking, can I work here? Can I be in space? Can I work in space? And they said, well, 750,000 Earth humans work with them currently, and all you have to do is ask repeatedly. If you keep asking at least 3 times, right, you're going to go. So yeah, I add to that. That's good.
Yeah, I'd like to say that, to Barbara's point, I was teaching in Glastonbury in England, and I did a whole slideshow one night on the Tree of Life, which is one of my passionate things because it appears in every culture of the world, and it's a synonym basically for there's a human tree of life, a planetary tree of life, a cosmic tree of life, and it's kind of like the road back home, if you know what I mean. And so I had spoken, and the whole idea of ETs came up, and I talked about them very positively. The next morning, a huge crop circle of the Tree of Life appeared in the field next to Glastonbury. So they were tuning in. And then for many years, I was speaking at the Whole Life Expos, and many different cities. In LA, that was one of the places that Barbara and I and Dolores Cannon, there were a lot of us that were doing that circuit for years, and it was great. And so afterwards, I would stay over, and I would do shamanic workshops. So see people for readings during the week, and then I would have an event up in Topanga Canyon or Malibu. I was staying on this 10-acre Arabian horse farm, which was the coolest. And they were Shumash Indian land. And at dawn and dusk, sometimes you'd see the Indian spirits sitting around the medicine circle, which was so cool. And, you could look out over the cliffs and see Point Dune, and there's UFOs that come out of the water around Point Dune. And so I would have these one-day events for women, actually only at that time. I was only teaching women shamanically. Now I'll teach men too, but we'd have like 38 women, and it would be totally cool. We'd be outside on the land and doing shamanic stuff. And then at night, we'd have dinner, and then we'd light the fire, and we'd do ceremony and call in the directions. So, when I call the directions, when I call the above, north, south, east, west, the above, below, and the center, when I call the above, the ET ships started coming in. Okay, and I was calling in the ETs, and it was so funny because the women were all like, oh my God, the ETs, they were like freaking out. And I was like, okay, girls, listen, wake up here. Okay, do you want them or do you not want them? I mean, this is not, So like half of them were like, yeah, we want want them. The other half are like, no, we don't want them. We don't want them. We're scared of them. And I'm sure those ET people were monitoring us completely, okay? And so I said, let's make a decision. What are we going to do? And so they said, let's have a sign. We want a sign. I said, okay, we're not wanting you to teleport down here or anything, but we need a sign, okay? Suddenly, you know, it was a totally clear sky with stars. It was like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The clouds rolled in like Mamma Mia, okay? And the women were like, whoa, you know, they really are ETs. So when we broke the circle that night and released the directions, within 10 minutes, totally clear sky again. So they totally, just like Barbara said, they'll tune in.
You know, another thing that is so cute, I just love this. I was whisked away by a driver, this was several years ago, to go to Malibu, to way, way, way up on the mountain, for a birthday party that was given for a DJ in the Los Angeles area. He had a big following of fans, and they gave this birthday party way up on the mountain, and they had asked me to come and talk about extraterrestrials. So this was an open, like a little tiny wooden platform, and then little chairs set up here near the mountaintop. And I was talking about extraterrestrials, and was only about a minute into my talk, and not knowing whether most of the people in this particular group knew about UFOs or extraterrestrials. So kind of giving basics. Like I said, well, some people go to sky watches and ask to see crafts coming over, and they just sit there and they watch, and like in a place like this, and suddenly I looked up and there was a UFO flying over. And I thought, you know, I think that was purposeful. I think that they remotely knew that this group of people was gathered for that, and that this particular person was talking about seeing these crafts fly over, and suddenly there it was flying over. I love it. They really tune into us, I think.
Yeah, one of the things Barbara and I were talking about at breakfast yesterday is how we have a lot of colleagues that are really good people, they're good researchers, but they're very fear-based. And I look at it like we are the ambassadors. You know, they need human ambassadors like us, like Micheila, like these guys on this panel, to be able to act as a bridge, like you guys sitting out there, okay? So by staying in the frequency of love, that's what you're going to attract. And there are, as Barbara said, a lot of higher dimensional beings that really want to help us, but they don't want to scare the bejeepers out of us either.
I don't want to take up too much time, but I want to add, because I think it's awesome that you can ask to go on a ship or to meet an ET, but you can also ask to go back into your past and recover any experiences that you've had as a child that you have an inkling about that you may not remember. And that's something that's been huge for me, because I know I was channeling as a child. I shut it down. I came to it later in life, but I had this feeling that I'd had visitation as a young child, and gradually they started to take me back and show me all of these different things. And there was this really funny one I just want to share because it was kind of hilarious. But most of the interactions that I had were teaching situations. So I was taken on a ship and I was taught with other children things from the Pleiadians, and even there was some Arcturian visitation. And so they showed me that I was so frustrated by that I could never go and just have fun. So I was always going, and I was like in class, and they said, well, where do you want to go? And so anyone remember Gilligan's Island? So I was like a huge fan of Gilligan's Island, and I said, well, I want to go see the stars of Gilligan's Island. And so I have this, they showed me, so I had this pool in my backyard. It was a raised up pool, and we had a German Shepherd. And so the first vision I see is this German Shepherd is barking at the pool at like 2 a.m. And I'm wondering why no one else in the house is awake. And I'm the only one who hears the dog, so I follow the dog out. I see the ladder magically come down on its own, and the ship lands right on top of the pool. So I walk up the ladder, get onto the deck of the pool, get onto the ship, and they literally took me to Hollywood. I see the Hollywood sign, and so they gave me this fun experience in the middle of all of the teaching that I went through as a child, just because I asked.
All right, let's move on to the next question. We only have about 15, 20 minutes at most, and try to keep them as short and concise as possible so we can get the next two.
No pressure. Good morning. Micheila, yesterday you were talking about the old grid and why it was created, and because, if I understood you correctly, it was because there were negative energies or influence in our planet, and it didn't want to be spread out into the greater universe. I'm just curious, who did that?
We all did. So I work with the Council of Light. They're a 12-dimensional multi-raced council, and I believe that their assignment is to oversee the universal grids. And this is where information is exchanged. So we believe the things on our planet don't have any impact anywhere else, but that's not true at all. Everything that we create, everything that's created elsewhere is meant to be shared and interacted with for the purpose of expansion. So it's not necessarily negative energy so much as it is collective potentials that they see, like massive wars and things like that. And there was a lot of things going on that had the potential to skew timelines elsewhere. So this encapsulation is, see, we're a part of this council. We all agree to oversee all of the universe such that we are all growing and expanding in love and light together. But we don't remember that when we come here, right? But we do participate in it. So that encapsulation, it wasn't necessarily a sanction so much as it was a vibrational field that kept the things that were going to have or potentially going to have an effect elsewhere here for us to deal with as a race.
So it wasn't like a negative ET race that did that. It was
No. I think this was a benevolent action, and I think it was appropriate. I think it helped us to come to terms with what was going on our planet and actually awaken. But I don't think that encapsulation fully exists anymore. I think it's disintegrating. I can make it real simple. I think the third dimension is an encapsulated dimension. I think it's a place where we're encapsulated in our own minds. We're encapsulated in our karma. We replay timelines over and over again, right? It's just this vicious loop that we have a hard time getting out of. But the new grid is actually an exit point. So we've created that as well through our awakening.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I love humor, so as a matter of fact, Friday night I thought it was really funny when I think Ethann was on stage talking and your microphone, Micheila, didn't work, and he said, well, that's for a reason, and everybody laughed. But it was beautiful because then it gave the audio guy enough time to turn it up. So have any of you had an experience where you were listening and you heard, let's say, an Arcturian say something funny about a Pleiadian or something like that? and if or anything to do with humor.
I can't remember anything specific like that, but I will say they do have humor, and I think that's one of the greatest gifts when you have a connection with an extra-dimensional race, because they bring light to everything, and it doesn't have to be so serious. And actually, I think this is how you can discern a little bit as to what type of ET collective you're working with, because if things are starting to feel really heavy and the messages are really serious and there's a lot of things you have to do, you're probably not connecting with an ET or an ET race that you want to be working with, because it does feel lighter, it feels more like play, and they're perpetuating creativity and things that we've lost here on this freedom, things that we've lost here on this planet. So Yeah, I don't know if any of you have stories to add. But I've never heard them crack a joke about the Arcturians or anything like that I recall.
So many people, when they are regressed to their experiences with extraterrestrial beings, so many of them report that when they're on the ship for an experience, that there's very often a group of different kinds of beings, different species of extraterrestrial beings who are there working cooperatively together. So there might be one type around a medical table doing various things, and there might be somebody, usually a mantis being, kind of a little bit further away, maybe 10 feet away, and they're very tall, and they can observe everything that's going on, and telepathically they can sort of direct them as to whatever the procedures are that are going on. And there might be a couple in the room that look very, very human-like. In fact, people think, oh, there are some other people here. But as they look more closely, they realize, well, they're not exactly people. Their eyes are much bigger, but they're very attractive-looking people from our human point of view. And there might be hybrids there, the kind of hybrids who live on the ships, who look partially human and partially not human. And all the interaction between these beings goes on telepathically. So I've never yet heard any one person who's had an experience on one of the UFOs say that they heard a conversation among these beings, but they are conversing telepathically. And some of us actually have telepathic abilities too, and we might not know that because, I mean, we all speak to each other from the earliest times. I mean, when we're just out of the womb, our parents are saying, oh, how wonderful, you know. And right from the get-go, we talk. But there are some among us, I'm not one of them particularly, but there are some among us who really can just, in a very relaxed way, just tuning to each other's thoughts. And so that's what those beings do. And they don't, it seems like, have the kind of emotion that we have too. And so humor, I think, has a lot to do with emotion. And so, anyway, the people I have regressed, and that's a couple of thousand of them now, and more extraterrestrial experiences. Some of them have had a lot of experiences that they've regressed to as well. But so I don't think I've heard anybody report that there's humor between them, but there certainly is a lot of knowingness and communication going on between them. And maybe they have humor that we don't understand because they don't have that full emotional component like we do.
Yeah, I'd like to respond a little bit. It's not so much to the humor, but, you know, the beings from the praying mantises, those are from Cassiopeia. And they're a very, very ancient race. And they're really, they produce a very calm trilling sound that completely calms the nervous system. I actually like them. You know, they're scholars. They have vast libraries of knowledge. I've met one in the physical world. He was a human person who had been a praying mantis, and he had incarnated as a human. Brilliant, like tech mind, you know, like mathematics, you know, really great systems kind of brain. The gray aliens are very interesting. Many years ago, one of these conferences, big conference, I was taken into like a kind of a secret meeting. This has got to be 12 years ago or something. And I became privy to some very interesting information, and I'll just share a little bit of it with you guys about the Greys. There was a physicist that worked for the government, and he was a biologist. I mean, he wasn't a physicist, he was a biologist, microbiologist. And he was brought in to try to cure an illness of some virus. And he wasn't making any headway after like 2 years. And eventually they took him in to a place that had like a hermetically sealed circular room, you know, with like a revolving doorway. And they suited him up and they took him in there, and up from the floor came an alien, a little gray dude. And the little gray dude was telepathic. His range was about 60 feet. And he actually was one with great emotion. And over a period of 2 years, this guy took numerous skin samples from the little dude. And basically, the little guy had peripheral neuropathy, which is a very, very painful nerve disease. He was in a lot of pain. And that was the thing that the microbiologists had been hired to try to cure. Well, so they started making friends telepathically. But, you know, he was heavily monitored, so it was like, you know, at the government, you know, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing sometimes. But anyway, basically, this little dude told him that he came from 60,000 years in our future. And that what had happened in their timeline was that we had a war on our planet, that the power elite went down underground into underground bunkers and stuff. And basically, you know, you put a bunch of scientists and military types down there, what are they going to do? Twiddle their thumbs? So they started making these android kind of biological units that were the original little gray dudes with no sex organs. They didn't have to eat. They rub like substance on their body to feed them. No emotional bodies. Well, in time, these little dudes wound up leaving the planet and going to the Tau Ceti system. And they got to the point of realizing that they were at a dead end, because even though they were mentally brilliant, they had no emotional body. So they started coming back in time to the original home planet, us, to do the abductions, to get the original DNA, to try to upgrade to get an emotional body. And so the gray aliens, they come from different timelines. You know, maybe from 10,000 years in the future, no emotional body, 20,000 more, 30,000, 40,000. By 40,000 years, he said they were fully, you know, the integration between emotion, mind, very peaceful society. They had families, they had wives, they had children, all of this. So that is a very interesting explanation, okay, for understanding how there are these different types, some of which seem to be very empathic and intuitive in the little gray dude world, and some that seem to be kind of cold with no emotional body, based on how far in the future they're coming back from. Isn't that an interesting explanation? And this guy was heavily guarded. I mean, he eventually got out of the program, but he had a handler. It was a you know, I can't tell you who he was because that's all hush hush, but still heavily guarded even today because he had this information. You can corroborate that. Will you speak to that?
Yeah, I can corroborate that. It was around the year 2000. For about 3 years, we called him actually the gray dude. He would show up probably about 2:30 in the morning every night for years, giving messages, and the whole story. So he unfolded the whole story. So this was a group. So I worked in a company called Transdimensional Systems. We were a remote viewing think tank, and weird stuff happens, man. I mean, this gray would show up, and basically over that period gave the story, and it's as you say, exactly as you say. And I find it interesting that you use the term gray dude because that's what we called him, the gray dude. The gray dude showed up last night, and you know, here's another piece of the story, right?
I just want to make a statement.
No, I never met him. I never met that being. It was a group. It was in a hotel room. There were about 6 of us, 8 of us. I was taken into kind of the inner circle of discovering who this microbiologist was. I never met the microbiologist, okay, and I certainly never met the gray dude. But it is interesting that the gray dude is like what's coming out of my mouth, considering it's a gray dude.
I just want to thank you all for everything. It's been, for me, yesterday was complete. But I want to make a statement because disclosure is happening now. It's not coming, it's happening now. And I find that my experience, because I see them all the time, chips are all over the place, but they're not in this dimension, in the 3D. You have to raise your vibration to the 5th, 6th dimension, and I guess they bring their vibration. I don't understand, but they're around. But I don't see them in the metal ships. It's in another dimension. I don't know how to explain it. They're all over the place, and it's happening now. It's not happening in the future, it's now. Just so all we need to do is raise our vibration, and they're here.
Well, you're making an awfully good point that many of them are interdimensional or other dimensional. I think that is indeed true. And some of these crafts seem to have the ability to be physical at times, and we actually do see them and photograph them and film them, videotape them. We've got plenty of that collected. And then even those crafts that appear to be so physical, they can suddenly blink out. And so that may be that they go into their other dimensional aspect. There are different theories about why they sort of seem to suddenly disappear. But there really are many, and the Disclosure Project now is talking about, unusual lights, like huge orbs that were seen by sailors and, the Nimitz warship and everything where this was witnessed. So, I mean, it's both and, I think.
Yeah, because when you see it on a higher dimension, to me, it took me many years to understand what it was because it wasn't concrete. Nobody ever talked that the ships were in other levels. You only hear it about the metal ones. And there is the plasma ships. They're all different types. So I was just curious, if people know that just by raising their vibration, the closest they get to have that disclosure.
Oh, good point. The more that humans raise our vibrations, the more that we'll be able to see them in their other dimensional state of being. Yeah, excellent.
Well, thank you to our panelists. Amazing lineup of questions and answers.